So person 4 is the one who gets eliminated. So instead of needing 10 to the 6 operation we determine who gets eliminated, you can do a little bit of math to count out the number of cycles and then manually sort of step through to the end and then say this person gets eliminated. And then you've now taken this operation that we originally would have taken 1 million operations, but now only takes like 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so is that how most of the teams have been solving it?
I haven't actually seen any code from any of the teams yet, but the way that the problem bounds are set up, it seems that this is likely to be sort of the approach that they take. And this is sort of fairly common, I think, in these sorts of problems involving cycles, which is if you know that you have a cycle and you're going to travel the cycle many times, you just skip traveling the cycle altogether and you say, okay, I know I've traveled the cycle some number of times. Let me now figure out, like, at the very end, like 2 steps or however many steps I need to get to the ending loop.
Right. Yeah, and so it looks like back on the scoreboard, a lot of teams have actually caught up. Swarthmore actually has pulled ahead a little bit with 9 problems, their 9th problem. And good 6 or 7 teams that all have 8 problems solved. We're taking a look right now at some of the teams like Purdue, and it looks like they're all kind of trying to crank through these problems and trying to get these full scores.
Yeah, and as they're like the two hardest problems on the set looked like problem A and problem F. Like they would have earlier only had 1 solve on them. We're looking at Purdue, for example. Purdue actually sort of bucked the trend a little bit, and I believe it looks like they were the first team actually to solve problem F at 24 minutes, and we're now at the 35-minute mark. So Purdue, maybe in some sense, maybe they have a little bit of an advantage. Like they've knocked out one of the harder problems first, and so now they just have to churn through ones.
Yeah.
But this is where like the penalty mechanic can sort of come into play. Like because that the penalty works is it's the sum of all of the times at which you solve the problem. If you actually solved like the harder, invested a bunch of time in that, you're a little bit behind the clock, and all of the teams that went and actually solved like easier problems, they'll have a lower penalty.
Right. Yeah, so it's actually really important in this contest format to kind of find the easy problems and identify them to solve early.
Yeah, and now we're looking at the scoreboard actually. Sophomore just solved their 10th problem. They solved problem G and solidly in first. UT Austin coming right up behind with problem E, and so now they're uniquely in second with 9 problems. Purdue has a submission on A. We're about to jump into 9th, but they have a wrong answer.
Yeah. It looks like there definitely are a lot of subtle bugs or things subtly incorrect. See over here, Stanford is typing something in Python. Do you think that maybe they're trying to test out like how Python works on the interpreter or something?
That's a good question. In fact, during the dress rehearsal, there were lots of things that the teams will probably want to try. So a lot of teams are usually like specialists. They specialize in C++ or Java. Very occasionally, actually prefer to use Python. One of the big advantages of the code can be really short, and you can write really short programs really quickly, and that'll help like really low penalty. But one of the disadvantages of that Python is it's slower than like C++ and so on.
Yeah. So a lot of teams generally favor C++, but there are some cases where maybe you prefer to use Python, or because they learned it right, or they have more advanced libraries. One of the big cases for this is like large integers with a lot of precision, and those are pretty hard to. Those are actually pretty hard to implement in C++, but Python and Java both have actually implemented this for you.
Yeah. All right. So it looks like coming up here, we're going to have an ad from JetBrains. So we'll let that ad play through. Oh, and sophomore is just every problem actually, just in time for this ad.
All right, and we're back. We have news now that every team has solved at least one problem. So that's exciting. And apparently, problem G, the musical chairs problem, one of the judges had a comment that it's much easier if you're a radio operator, like an amateur radio operator.
Is that how amateur is switches between people?
No, I was talking about the Morse code aspect.
Oh, the Morse code aspect of it.
Yeah, and figuring out how to compress your message. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, so actually, more just finished everything, but we can see getting some wrong submits on F. And so it looks like they're doing, we were talking about earlier, where they're trying to test out this, they're trying to get different verdicts to see what kind of behavior results in RP and what kind of behavior results in wrong answer, and things like that.
Yeah, and it's definitely the time you want to test these sort of things in the system. We noticed MIT in particular, their strategy wasn't to solve as many problems, but was to maximize number of balloons. So in this practice, many easy problems. We don't want to wear out the runners. So the runners are the person to the station. So in ICPC, every time you solve a problem, you get a balloon.
Right.
And so only 3 problems in this contest. They were deemed the 3 of the hardest problems in this contest have balloons. So that way there's a limited number of balloons that are coming on the platform at one time. So that's what they went for, was the harder problems, so that they could guarantee maximize number of balloons.
Right. So once they got all kind of done, like they don't care too much about their problems, and they're just trying to test the system.
Actually, I don't know what their strategy is after that.
Yeah.
I just know that, like, in the contest, the reason that they were going after the problems they were going after is they wanted balloons, which is definitely a goal that is a real contest. You win if you get the most.
Right. Yeah. And so I don't know if they have any of the first solve balloons as well.
Oh, right. Yeah, we should talk about first solve. So every team that if you're the first one, you get a first solve balloon. At World Finals, usually there's a prize associated with first solve. Do we know if there's a prize for this contest?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard about a prize, but it's pretty standard at World Finals, so maybe there will be one here as well.
Yeah, we'll get it tomorrow. And be correct about it on the real broadcast.
Yeah. So I don't know. Tell me a little bit about any of these that you see doing well, and are there any teams that you see doing well here that you think really have a shot at qualifying for World Finals tomorrow?
Well, there's a lot of the teams we mentioned before have already gotten their berth, like MIT or UBC. So they were the regional winners. But I think there are a lot of strong teams that were not so. Examples being like USC, Virginia Tech, UCF, Harvard. Harvard's a strong team. So like MIT team is extraordinarily strong, and Harvard's in the same region, so they didn't automatically qualify to the World Final. They're fighting for that wild card slot today. And I know members have been doing contests for a long time, since high school.
Right.
At least 2 of their members. And so a lot of the same kind of problems show up here in the ICPC, so they've had a lot of practice throughout their life to get ready for this kind of contest.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. There are a good number of contestants who have kind of been doing this since high school. And there are also a good number of contestants who kind of haven't been. I don't know. Were you involved with like the UCF program?
Yeah. So for when I was a student, I competed for UCF, and then I went on to coach their team for a number of years. And a lot of their team members don't train from high school. They're trained entirely through the UCF program. And that's like a really unique thing for them, is they basically learned everything they know at the university, where some of the other teams had been for a long time, got their skills there, and then have just been polishing that in college. So it is a mix of teams. So we definitely have some teams that have competed since high school, and some teams that are entirely learned everything.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's pretty cool that these teams managed to kind of bring in having these programs manages to bring more people into these contests and have more people be interested in this kind of programming contest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So over here we can see the scoreboard again. I don't know if we figured out what the green bars are referring to, or the green and the yellow bars.
Oh, over the problem name?
Yeah.
Or,
Over the team names. Yeah. Perhaps those are the qualifiers. I know that MIT and Cornell were both winners of their thing. So perhaps those are the projected advance.
Well, MIT and Cornell have already advanced.
Right. So
but
maybe
someone like Rochester or Princeton had not advanced. So
right.
I think it's actually a problem break.
Uh-huh.
So like all the teams that have 7. Oh, but it doesn't hold for teams that have 8. Oh, those are all first teams.
Well, these are the first to solve problems.
Oh yeah, the stars.
Oh, I see.
Oh yeah, we're looking at North America.
Right, and not the global scoreboard.
So right now we're looking at the subset of teams. So it's Northeast region, East Central region, Southeast region would all be considered North America.
Greater
East,
New York,
I believe as well.
Right. Yeah. So how do the regionals? How many regionals are there, and how do they work in general?
So we have 11 regions.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So we just got confirmation that the stars mean that they're regional champions, so they're the top team from their own region, and then the green boxes are the projected advancers. So if the scoreboard, then it would be who moves on to World Finals.
Yeah. So there was some talk over like North America East versus the Northeast region. We're even grouping them not their home region. So every team competed in 11 regional contests in North America. But there's also another division where it's like East, West, and I don't know what the other directions are.
I guess there's a Midwest.
Yeah, there's so it's East, West, and
South or something?
Some fourth mysterious region that we do not know yet. So do we know if the stars are the region or this extra division? Oh, okay.
Right.
So the stars are when they competed in regional. So you see there's 3 stars for North America South.
Right.
And so North America South includes Southeast region, includes South Central, and includes Swarthmore. Do you know where Swarthmore?
I'm not sure where Swarthmore's from.
Mid-Atlantic
regional.
Okay, great. So the Mid-Atlantic regional is the one that includes like Virginia Tech, Maryland, and is UCF, Georgia Tech, Clemson, and Florida. Those central is Texas and schools, and so that gives you an idea of like how the regions are dispersed. I think it also includes Louisiana and a few other for region.
Right.
So, of course, Baylor too. Baylor being where a lot of the heads for ICPC are part of that university.
Right. A lot of the organization is based in Baylor.
Right. The headquarters is based in Baylor. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah.
And they're also part of the South Central. All right. So now we're looking at North America. So that includes Pacific Northwest. So you see Caltech was the winner of the Southern California Regional, and this also includes UBC, which won Pac Northwest, and Utah, who won the Rocky Mountain Regional. Right. And so those 3 teams have already qualified for World Finals, but you see a lot of these teams that haven't qualified that are still pretty strong, which is Berkeley, UCLA, USC, Stanford University. They haven't qualified to the World Finals yet, so they're fighting for the 7 wildcard slots.
Right. Yeah, I think it's pretty exciting that they actually get to compete against people outside of their region for these wildcard slots, which isn't something that they've had to do before.
Right. So the wildcard slots previously were designated in a way that wasn't transparent, or wasn't like the two teams had to compete against each other to decide the wild card slot. It was much more in other elements, like did your region medal in previous years and things like that. And a lot of these universities are much bigger fan of being able to compete head-to-head slots,
Right.
like they would at World Finals.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of very tricky adjustment that we kind of had to do manually before to say that, oh well, if we want to send the best North American teams, the third best team at this region is about as good as this region, so maybe we should send 3 from this and 2 from this.
Right.
And now we actually have this opportunity to kind of see for ourselves exactly which teams are the best.
And once again, like the NAIPC was the precursor to this as the first North American champ, but this set is much harder than the kinds of sets you would see in a regional contest typically. So like the NAIPC the last few years was kind of used as a way to get ready for the World Finals in a sense. So it's a set approaching World Finals level difficulty or World Finals level difficulty. It varies year to year depending on how difficult the set is. But then it is a much better indicator of how you will do at World Final on a much tougher set than what you see in your regional. So are there any differences you think in general between like the style of problems that we like to set in NAIPC or like the difficulty with World Finals? Is it mostly trying to target the same style, or are there any like particular differences? Well, I can only talk about previous years, of course, since
right.
so well tomorrow we'll talk about the actual set, but for previous years there are some like stylistic differences that have existed in previous years, the NAIPC and the World Finals. But roughly, we see a lot of like really hard problems, and that's shared between them, and then also like problems that require you'll be unsure of your solution when you start thinking about it. So you have to spend some time trying things in order to get it working, as opposed to reading a problem and knowing how to solve it right away. And so, or at least for these top teams. So these are the best teams in North America, and so they're all competing against each other at a really high level. They had to beat hundreds of teams from each of their respective regions to get here, and they're only the top 5 or teams from each of these regions. So they can handle a harder set. And so they have to basically adjust to this style of contest where getting only a handful of problems is maybe good enough. As opposed to the regional, maybe they solve their whole set.
I want to give a quick shout out that you can all join our Discord at the link shown on the stream. And I think we'll have some people monitoring it and even be able to answer some questions that any of you guys post to Discord.
Yeah, and so for coaches watching, if you want to find out something about your teams, the judges will be looking at that Discord and will be feeding to talk about. So if you want to hear your team be talked about on the broadcast, please post to the Discord.
Yeah, so I guess we're still looking at some of the various teams that have actually finished the contest. Right now it looks like
Duke is in second place, finished all problems. MIT is in third, finishing all problems.
And MIT is now testing the question system. So what that system looks like.
So the
judges.
So the idea with the question system is if a problem is ambiguous. So the judges are really proud and think that they wrote a problem that is completely ambiguous and clear, or completely unambiguous and clear, and has no issues. But if you count in a problem statement that something isn't clear and can be interpreted in one way, and you don't know which version of the and you can make that very clear to the judges, then the judges will answer your question and feedback to clarify the problem. And so that's what that mechanism is for. The judges work very hard to make sure that the problem set is as clear as possible. All the teams are doing right now is testing that mechanism. Have to use it in contest.
Right. It's much better to know that you can get your question and answer now, and it'd be kind of a shame if we came to the actual contest and you asked a question and it just went into the ether.
Right. Yeah. So the judges are definitely looking at that stream, listening for questions, and so sometimes teams will also, there are legitimate questions to ask in the practice round. Thing is compiled, like where are the compile instructions. All of that's posted online, but last chance to ask those kind of system level questions as well without eating up terminal time on the computer, which is the bottleneck resource of the contest. So it's best to get those kind of issues out of the way now in the practice round before going into the real contest.
So there's actually another system that I don't know if I've seen the team's tests, which is printing. So I don't know if you want to say a little bit about how printing works and whatnot.
Oh yeah, so the teams can print out their code or print out. So the idea is, if you're working on a problem and you're trying to solve it, you don't want to debug on the computer because that's going to take up all that precious terminal time. So you can print out your code. The printout will be delivered to you by a runner, and then you can debug, look for your bug just by tracing the lines of code line by line. And then if you've ended up figuring out how to figure out what's wrong with your code, then you can get back on the terminal, fix your code very quickly and not eat up that much of a resource. Also, anytime submission is sent in, you get your feedback through a printed piece of paper as well. So you don't have the person on the computer and ask, oh, did it come back correct or incorrect? You can just wait for the printout to come.
I before competing in this, I don't think I would ever really tried to read a piece of code written printed out on paper, and it's definitely it's an experience to kind of run through it on paper.
Definitely. I find sometimes it can be easier to catch on paper than they are on just code on your computer. Just putting the code in a different context can make it a little easier to find your seeing things from a different angle. It's definitely nice to see your code from a different perspective. I've even heard, I've never actually tried this myself, but I've even heard people say that you should change your color scheme when you're reading your code to, or open it in a different editor to kind of try and read it differently. That's the other thing I think helps if you write your code on paper before going to the terminal. Is as you're typing it in, you're basically reading your code again. So if there is some kind of critical bug, you can catch it while you're translating your code from paper to the terminal to actually. So I've certainly caught bugs like that in contests. So there are ways for team strategy just to use being off the terminal effectively. And I think that's a key to going from a single person where you always have access to the computer to this team-oriented contest where that bottleneck. It's definitely something that I think we can see in these contests, that though there's only one computer, teams here with 3 people do considerably better than teams of just one person. And so it means that they really are splitting their time well and parallelizing even without access to the computer. So did you when you were competing at World Finals last year, did you end up having a strategy where every person's solving one problem per person, or were you teaming up on problems as well?
So at World Finals, it's kind of a funny story. So usually we tended to read the problems and maybe split them up and claim problems to prepare and code. But at World Finals, it was actually the first time that we actually had 2 people implement different parts of the same problem. So this was one of the this is problem F, I believe. And there were kind of 2 halves of the problem. And the first half was doing some geometry code to process some of the data that we were given. And the second half was running programming to solve it. And so when we saw the problem, we pretty quickly identified what the geometry step was, but we weren't quite sure how to do the dynamic programming. So we actually just immediately gave it to Z, who was one of my teammates, to start coding the geometry part. And then when he finished, then I, who had just, who had spent their time thinking about the dynamic programming, went and finished the program. So this is actually, I think, the first time that we've ever coded a problem with one problem with two different people. But I think, and I think that is pretty rare. I think people in these usually just have one person coding a single problem. That depending on the team, some teams will talk about it more, talk about problems more before coding them, but it's usually still one person typing it in the end.
Yeah. So what about last hour strategy? So as we're like heading into the last hour, what do you think? What do you think is a good last hour strategy for teams to consider when approaching a hard set like this?
Yeah, so the last hour is pretty special. The biggest thing that changes in the last hour, which I don't think it's going to change here, is that the scoreboard stops being updated. So you're able to actually other teams' submissions, but not whether they were correct or not. So sometimes you can still kind of guess whether they were correct or not. Like, if you've seen them submit 5 times, maybe they had a bug or something. If you've seen them submit like 5 times and then they suddenly stop, then maybe they actually got it in the end. But I think the other thing about the last hour is when you have all your like hard or impossible problems left. And so if you know how to solve one of them, that's pretty good, and you kind of just for the last hour and try and solve it. Otherwise, you can kind of just mess around with the other whichever problem, especially if there are problems that like you think involve heuristics and stuff, because any problem is worth the same amount of points, and if you solve it, then it's strictly better to solve more problems. One thing you can try doing is you can try submitting like heuristic solutions, and you can, instead of solve it for all possible cases, you just implement some heuristics or some tricks which and make it work.
Yeah, so like one legitimate strategy, if you're like doing these kind of contests, is instead of solving it the way the judges intended, so that like for every single problem in a contest, there's an intended judge solution that the judge had in mind when they set the problem. So it's solvable in those bounds. You can prove that you can always solve it in those bounds. But then there are solutions where they don't work on all test cases. The judge data doesn't handle it. And like the terminology that I hear a lot thrown around comes from like esports culture, which is cheesing solutions.
Yeah, I've heard it called hacking solutions.
Yeah. So I've heard the terminology come from esports. I've heard the hacking solutions terminology as well. And so the idea with these, they're not going to work on all test cases, but you're throwing in some clever heuristic either on the average case or speed it up based on or maybe it's even wrong. It works on the majority of cases that you could come up with. So the judge's job is to make sure that those kind of solutions don't pass, but sometimes it's very hard to break a solution if you don't have it in front of you. And so last hour strategy for some of these teams, as you were saying, is can we come up with something clever to get by the judges?
Right. It's the judges. Part of the judge's job is not only like writing these problems and writing the judge model solution. It's also trying to come up with and imagine up these like heuristics that other people might come up with, and then writing test data to break those.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely like a really fun part of the judging process, is like trying to come up with. So it's almost like this meta game theory level problem where the teams are trying to come up with something that they don't think like people can come up with judge data to break, and the judges trying to think about the teams and think, what will the teams try to get by us so that we can block it and make sure that doesn't get by.
Yeah, I think a lot of this results from the way that these problems are judged, which is pretty unique. Instead of actually trying to like look at the code and prove it's correct, right? The way these submissions are evaluated is they're just run on a set of test data that has been pre-prepared, and so we've kind of take those tests as the source of truth, and so if they're correct, we'll award the team the points, regardless of whether the solution is provably correct or not. And so making the test data hard is strong is really important for us. So I guess we just hit the 1 hour mark, and yeah, sure. I think we can quick.
Yeah, so switch with Andrew. All right, so we'll be rotating commentators throughout the contest, so you get to hear each of us. And so Nick is now back.
Hi.
And so Nick, we both competed, you for Stanford, me for UCF, at the precursor to this contest, which was Chicago Invitational at the time, and then the follow-up with NAIPC. So what did you think of those contests overall the first time you saw them, and comparing them to regional finals?
Yeah, the 2012 was sort of my first experience with with a very hard style of contest, the University of Chicago Invitational. At the time, it was advertised as like, this is basically going to be a world final simulation, and that contest was surprisingly difficult. I still remember on that contest, our team solved 9 problems, but I was only actually able to contribute a solution to 1 problem. And that was sort of when I realized, like, wow, like World Finals is going to be very tough. And it was nothing like regionals. Like at regionals, we only solved 9 problems, but the difficulty curve was much more generous. So, like on the easy end, like we had 2 or 3 problems that were like very approachable. But looking at the set in 2012, there wasn't like any sort of like approachable problem. Like every problem just sort of had like some like required like 2 or 3 sort of non-trivial observations before you could even get to like implementing a solution. And then in 2013, sort of, it was coming in on my second year at World Finals, and I sort of knew like okay, like this is the sort of set that we're coming into, and I came in much more prepared. I wasn't looking for like an easy problem. And I just sort of went in knowing like, okay, these problems are going to some work on paper, like spend like 15 minutes before starting the code. And then that year I was more prepared and actually helped contribute more to my team. So yeah, overall, I think I'm expecting that these teams, hopefully these teams don't get lulled into a false sense of security with the dress rehearsal. Like right now we have 15 teams here who have solved every problem in the dress rehearsal, but come the day of the conference, like we should probably not expect 15 teams to solve all the problems.
Right.
I know that you have said all the problems, or you've already looked at all the problems. You're one of the problem setters, and you probably have your own expectations. Mm-hmm. But like, how many teams do you normally expect to solve like all the problems in a World Final level set, or like North American Invitational level set?
So, like looking back at the last few years of World Finals, I think only one team in recent memory has solved the set. So usually the entire set doesn't get solved by one team. So there's a judge in, I think, the Northeast European contest that had some criteria for mark of a good set, which is every problem is solved, but no team solves the entire set. And so that means the problem set was diverse enough, and that it had the appropriate challenge, wasn't too easy, wasn't too hard, but then there wasn't like the reason they didn't solve the whole set, there wasn't a problem that no team solved. And so like every problem was at least doable in the contest time, but the winning team chose a different subset. And so that's kind of what you expect for a really difficult problem set, but it does vary year to year. So some years the problem set's harder, some years the problem set's easier. And so as a team, you kind of have to adjust to that. You have to adjust to the fact that like it's not always going to be the same level of challenge, and you going in if it's going to be more or less challenging. And so you have to your expectations and just adapt to the set rather than like, oh no, I only have 3 or 4 problems doing very well, because like the 2014 World Finals, for example, that was good enough to win the sub-regional for North America. 3 problems won for the North American regional. Cool. Yeah, sounds good. So I'm going to swap in, and we're going to interview another judge. Oh yeah, let's bring an interview. So
You can move now.
so just unmute. Yeah, we want to back up a little bit so we're all in mute.
Yeah. Sorry. All right. Hello, hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yep. Yeah. So
Perfect.
now what we have here is Arnav, who's one of the judges. And he's coming on to talk about the practice set. So what do you think about the team's performance on the practice set so far?
Yeah. No, I thought the teams all did really well. I think the top team, Swarthmore, solved 11 problems in minutes or something.
Wow.
So
yeah.
with no wrong submission. So that's super impressive. That's 3 minutes a problem, maybe a little, and you know. Even though they're barreling full speed ahead, they didn't really miss anything. So yeah, there are a bunch of other teams hot on their trail. We still got technically like almost an hour to go in the practice contest, but I think 5 or 6 teams have already cleared the set. So strong performance from all the teams. This is still the easiest problem from each region, but yeah, it's cool to see all of the teams so well. This is not going to be an easy competition. Yeah.
How did things look on the judging end? I know that, this being a dress rehearsal and all.
You can move now. Pretty much anywhere. You can come back to us. We can back to the court.
Oh.
So you can see the teams arriving now.
Yeah, day 1 was registration, so all the teams had to register and submit all their documentation and so on.
Yeah, anything you want to bring into the contest, you had to bring in the first day. So you're allowed 25 pages of materials. And so they had to bring that in the first day, meet with our sponsors who make this contest possible. We have NSA, 2 Sigma, SpaceX, JetBrains, who's the lead sponsor of finals, is also sponsoring North America. And so the teams got to meet with them, talk with them, got to talk with Georgia Tech some, and some really interesting events.
Yeah.
And ready for contest day tomorrow.
Looks like that finished up. Right before that, I was asking about the judging. I know that we run this dress rehearsal sort of for everyone to test out things. Like we as the commentators, we're testing out the mic setup and speakers, and they're running the contest floor, making sure that like printing works and so on. Like, was judging like super smooth? Is there anything there that like you feel comfortable sharing, or maybe you
Maybe I shouldn't share. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't talk about how we're still writing most of the problems. No, I'm kidding. The set for tomorrow is ready. But things went pretty smoothly on our end. All of the judges are super familiar with Caddis, so we use Caddis in a lot of the North American regionals. We use Caddis at the Worlds. But there's still some regions that don't necessarily use Caddis, so we were trying to catch all of the judges up to speed on maybe the interface. We actually had a lot of fun like looking at all of the team submit out where their bugs were. There were some really what's the right terms to figure out. But yeah, the team system seems to mostly work. We got a lot of great questions about, is this going to be representative of the experience tomorrow? I think we're going to tweak some of the settings a bit. Right now, the teams can actually see which test case they're failing on, which they definitely should not be able to see tomorrow. So it's good to get this feedback, as soon as possible in order to fix these things when comes game time. Yeah.
And so you were also like a contestant in a former life, and now you're here on the other side, like helping to prepare the problem set. Do you have any advice for like the contestants, like sort of just very generally, like anything that you as a contestant, like what did you wish you knew when you were out there, or sort of doing the problems that like the former generation of judges were preparing?
Oh yeah, I mean so much. I've learned a lot. I mean I learned a lot as a student in this competition. Learned an equal amount as a judge, like working with so many other great smart judges. One thing that I kind of wish I had done a better job of when I was a competitor was kind of together with my teammates. Usually we, especially at the beginning of the contest, our strategy was, split up, divide and conquer all the easy problems. Everyone kind of like knocks out an easy one, and then maybe we'll come together on the harder ones, either in a group of 2 or towards the end of the contest, all 3 of us working together. And I think we probably could have be done a little bit better if we had tried shaking things up a little bit more. We had a pretty set strategy of, okay, knock out the easy ones, 2 people get to, third person does something else, and then all 3 come together. But I think if we had been more flexible, if we had been able to maybe split off into different groups of 2 or be more flexible with the problems based on what comes at you, that's a huge advantage. But all the teams here look solid, so I'm not sure if how many teams?
Yeah, 20 teams have completely solved the contest now.
That's nuts.
That's one third of teams, and they're still going. They're still going. There's a good like 40 minutes left in the contest.
Yeah.
So we should hopefully, if we're fortunate, we'll actually be able to see even more of the teams full solve this set. Like, did the judges have a prediction for how would full solve the dress rehearsal?
There was actually a lot of disagreement. It depends on it depends on how kind of. I don't know how to say this. It depends on how the teams are treating this, right? There are a lot of different strategies for the dress rehearsal. Some teams just like to, blaze through the set as fast as possible because it's usually easier old problems, and then use the remaining time to kind of stress test the limits of the systems. Other teams just don't even bother with that first part and just immediately start stress testing the limits of the systems. My personal guess was about 25 teams would full set. I think it's actually going to be a lot higher since we've got 40 minutes to go and we're already at 20.
Yeah, the dress rehearsal is definitely a good time for teams to get acquainted with everything from like the keyboard that the software. Like as you said, like some of the judges weren't familiar with Caddis, and presumably some of these teams like at the regionals that didn't use Caddis, they have to get used to the Caddis system as well. Like I imagine that should be something that they get sorted out now rather than tomorrow. Yeah,
luckily it sounds like it's pretty easy to use. They should have a script which makes it pretty easy to just type in the command line to submit. And based on the high numbers of accepted solutions, I'm not too worried about that.
As you can see the contest floor right now that everyone's competing at, it's got this resting kind of octagon shape for all the pods for the different teams, and each team's in a pod where a team is competing on a face of an octagon. So a nice open contest floor for each of the teams. And as you can see, the balloons are being delivered to each of the teams as they are solving problems.
Yes. So specifically for the dress rehearsal, one thing you'll note is that there are teams that have solved 11. There are quite a lot. But if you look very closely, you'll see that teams actually only have at most 3 balloons. And the dress rehearsal being what it is, a collection of easy problems, and there not being a lot of staff members and the capacity to sort of deliver balloons at a frenetic pace, what the staff decided to do for the dress rehearsal was they said, we're only going to deliver balloons for what we consider to be the 3 hardest problems. And so as a result, if you look at the contest floor, like instead of teams having 11 balloons for 11 problems that they've solved, they only get balloons for the 3 hardest problems. And in fact, I think that was shown, like problems A, F, and G, I think were the balloon problems. So
A, F, and G were supposed to be the balloon problems. Something got flipped and K ended up being the balloon problem, but no big deal.
I see.
So the delivery to balloons is, since this is the dress rehearsal, a lot of the runners are saving some of their strength for tomorrow, for when like every problem has a balloon so that they can run those to the teams. So it's also just to keep the runners from passing, like giving all these balloons all at once. They can save it all for tomorrow.
Kind of just like another student.
So now we'll watch
He's a
that
first-year
interview.
professor, so he actually sits next to me in our web app development class where we're sitting next to each other. Well, he's learning to teach to the school-specific courses. I'm learning the courses, so we actually intermingle a lot, and we're able to talk not just as a teacher and a student, but as friends, where we also are able to work a lot on not only problems, but it kind of feels just like another friend like I have at school.
Accommodating and very friendly, as well as he also picks very good problems. He's inside information, kind of structure. Our coach wasn't worth finals, so he knows the deal.
All right.
Hey. Looks like after the short video.
Yep. So yeah, so 80 minutes into the contest, about like we were saying, I think more than 20 teams at this point have perfect. Expecting quite a few more over the next minutes. I think like at least 10 teams are within one problem of perfect, so we should see that soon.
Right. I think MSOE just got their 11th problem, and expect to see a lot more of these trickle in.
Yep. Stanford just got their second problem, which puts them at 58. I think it's likely like. They've just been kind of like testing the systems and so on. It'd be pretty interesting to see it, like if they do trying to get these problems, because I think 40 minutes is actually, I mean, it's tight obviously, but it is actually enough time to get through.
They
that.
actually, one of the problems they solved is problem A, which is actually one of the harder problems in this set we've seen. Well on their way.
Yeah, and interesting here actually on the stream too. One thing I just noticed is that the ones that have balloons, the F, G, and K, in the the G, for example, it shows the color of the balloon next to it, but the rest are all white. But yeah, so tomorrow every single problem will have a balloon, and so it'll have a different color.
Right. And you can actually, if you look at actually the contest floor, you can actually kind of tell which teams are doing better and which teams are not by who has the balloons and what colors they are and things like that. Yeah.
Right. In this case here, it's only out of 3, but yeah, that's pretty interesting. Do you know how many teams there are total?
It's 60 teams.
Exactly.
I think it's exactly 60, but I might be off by a little bit. We should check before tomorrow.
Cool.
Fair. All right. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and so I mean, I think at this point, largely, I would say teams have been kind of just testing the system, trying to get comfortable and so on. I imagine they'll kind of like have all 3 of their team members swap off and make sure everyone's comfortable with the OS.
Yeah. I think at this point they've also allowed the coaches onto the floor.
Oh, really?
I think I've seen like 4 people at a station. And so the coaches also have an opportunity to, instruct their team members to test the system and make sure that everyone is comfortable typing and things like that. Obviously, won't be allowed on the floor tomorrow.
Yep. I'm taking a look at Swarth here. Yeah, you can see they actually have a 4th chair pulled up.
Yeah.
So Swarthmore from earlier, one of like the fastest team, and like took over quickly. You can see they finished the entire set by 37 minutes. At this point, looks like they're mostly just chilling. Just relaxing a bit, maybe thinking about how they want to get things ready for tomorrow. The second place team, UT Austin, they finished at N4.
Right.
Swarthmore actually had a crazy lead, honestly, in this set.
Yeah, they really blazed through it. And one thing that we can see is actually the teams that finish earliest are not necessarily the teams that actually have the lowest penalty, because the penalty actually accounts for how fast you are on all the problems summed together.
Carnegie Mellon here in 3rd, and they finished in 54 minutes.
Yeah.
Do you know if the penalty was close between scores?
I think it was pretty close.
297 here.
Yeah. I mean, Swarthmore was only 200. It was 200 already, so
oh wow.
The gaps aren't too big. Yeah.
Definitely the kind of thing where like 1 or 2 wrong submits can make the difference. I think in our pre-ICPC experience, a lot of times where we've dipped below someone else in penalty because of our wrong submits. So
right. Yeah. And I think we're going to jump to a quick interview, and we'll be right back.
So the way we mainly tackle dealing with the computer and for people is we just kind of have one person dedicated to coding custom solutions, and then that way everybody is either working or and then at the end we talk about the solution and the other person
To work on like sharing one computer with 3 people, I think the biggest thing is just practicing and doing contests. Other than that, I think a lot of it comes down to trusting your teammates on what they, or like trusting your teammates' strengths and their abilities. So for example, if you have one teammate that you know is like really strong to solve a particular type of problem, you might let him solve that problem while you kind of think about a different thing. And I say like kind of like understanding people's strengths and like kind of paralyzing this like coding and thinking process is kind of the main to get good at sharing one computer between people.
I generally start on the computer for the first couple of minutes, and while I might not get the problem that should be solved first, I can start putting down some code for a problem which we plan to solve later. After that, hopefully we have found the quick problem, at which point we can start solving problems. And then we try to do a rotation where each person has a solved problem ready to go that they just need to code in. And then they can get in, do their code, and then someone else rotates on solving problems so that we're all ready to go at that time.
Why don't the test?
A super interesting video. I think a lot of different strategies as far as how to do it. Whether you have one person who's doing most of the coding, or all 3 switching off. How you approach this sort of the contest.
Yeah. I think it also depends. Like, there's no one size fits all solution. Kind of depends on like how comfortable different people are with different types of problems.
Yeah.
Sometimes teams just have one person who's way better than other people. The people are better at solving, and maybe it makes sense to have different strategies there than if all 3 people are kind of comfortable and you can kind of all do your own problems, and you don't have to worry about telling people how to. You don't have to worry about passing problems off to other people.
Yeah, I think recently too, like there's kind of a new strategy where you have 2 coders and then you have one like center, let's say, and the idea is that the 2 coders are like essentially saturating the keyword, like the person coding all the time and still being like able to keep up with all of it, but having 2 switching off is generally enough to make that work, and it's helping through with all of the parts of solving the hard problems, debugging, thinking about execution,
Time management.
Yeah, time management and strategy. You have one person who's almost kind of like calling the shots, and like they'll even like be keeping up on the scoreboard and trying to see what problems they should approach next. And so.
Yeah, and it looks like we're having a bit of a lull in submissions. It looks like most teams are have finished what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
They're kind of just chilling for the rest of the practice.
Yeah. Some of these teams with 11 are submitting more anyway. But
Yeah. I assume that maybe some of these submissions are in different languages, like they're submitting in Python and submitting in Java and trying to make sure that those languages work. Which languages are actually allowed in this country?
It's a tough question. So C++.
Right.
You're going to tell me if I got these right or wrong, right? C, I believe, is allowed also.
Right.
Java, Kotlin.
Right.
Is that it?
I think that's it. I actually asked you because I wanted to make sure that I didn't miss anything. But yeah, so I think the set of allowed languages is most of the teams will use C or C++. I guess most teams, but it looks a lot like C.
Yeah. Yeah, and C++ in particular is particularly because in these concepts, typically we're writing code with 2 main goals. The first one is that we want it to perform really fast.
Right.
And then the second thing is that we want it to be computer exactly what we want to do.
Right.
So a lot of other languages have, for example, a lot of like library can sometimes come into play, like Java and Python, or just kind of like much more, I'll say, high level developed languages.
Right.
Here in particular, honestly, it's like C++ is all you need, and it turns out that it actually does a really good job of what it's looking to do. Sometimes C++ will actually be like 10 or even 100 times faster than code written in some of these other languages like Python. So
Yeah. It's definitely a time difference that ends up mattering in these kind of contests. I think sometimes the time limits are sometimes slightly adjusted to try and compensate, but often it's not quite. It's hard to get that right. Yeah. So in the end, C++ is the language of choice. It's also in practice like a bit shorter to write than Java. Obviously, it's not shorter to write than Python. Because you barely have to write anything to write Python.
We saw some things that were messing around in Python at times, especially if it's, for example, if you're doing something that needs a lot of libraries, like big integer is one.
Right.
A lot of other examples as well. But also has something if you want to just like find some pattern, for example. Like often it's easier to just do a quick implementation in Python and take a look at that. You may end up with a submission in C++ if you need it for the performance, but Python is definitely fast for like demoing different things.
Right, yeah. The thing about these libraries is that a lot of judges tend to try avoiding setting problems that would give some languages advantages over others.
So you see, even submits from Carnegie Mellon all on problem G, by the way.
Right. They all seem to
all pass it.
They're all passing. They might even all be the same code.
Cool. So we're coming up on 90 minutes,
right.
which is 75% of the contest, and in the typical style warbird phase, which means we'll see submissions for each of these problems, but we know how those turned out, and so obviously the scoreboard as well. We won't know the final results until after the contest.
Right. So the teams will know their own results. They'll see their own results come back, but they won't be able to see the other team's results. So the teams can also see this live scoreboard as the contest progresses, just like us. And they won't be able to, and they can make decisions based on it. The last hour of the contest, you won't know, if you're in second place and you're trying to beat first place, you won't know how many problems they've solved and what the number to beat is.
And it's kind of funny for us on commentary because, and you guys watching the stream, because sometimes we'll screen peek and we'll see that a certain team, like when we're looking at their screen, we'll see that they submitted a problem and got it right, or we'll see what they're
right.
But the full scoreboard, we don't get the details until after the contest when that's revealed.
Yeah. So I guess a lot of teams are trying to submit to test out the frozen scoreboard to make sure that they still get their results. Maybe to try and see if they can glean some information about their about the other contents that are happening right now.
Yep. So neither of us know the problems yet.
Right.
We might actually not know the problems tomorrow either. We'll see how we plan
That's fine.
to play that. But so I get to ask you this question, which is basically, I'm curious what your thoughts are on like what you're expecting from the set tomorrow. If you think there'll be anything in particular, or maybe if there's like some problem type that you want to see.
Yeah, I'm expecting. I think this will be a pretty tough set. I think historically, like any ICPC, the precursor to this, has been pretty hard. I don't actually know if many teams have finished the set in the past. Maybe a couple teams.
Yeah, I think it's rare.
Yeah, and I think there will definitely be some problems that I think it'll be pretty likely that no team solves all the problems.
Do you think it'll be likely that there is a problem that no team solves?
I'm not so sure about that. It'll kind of depend. I think there are enough good teams here that may have coverage over all the problems.
That's the fun part for sure.
And if the judges have done their job right, then there will definitely be a problem that every team solves.
Right.
So.
Or at least every problem.
Right. I guess they could solve different
distinctions
problems.
To that make it different. Yeah, I know what you mean. And I think it's like, honestly, as a judge, like I think there's some concept of it's obviously really nice to get to challenge the contestants, but you actually really want to see someone solve your problem because I think it just kind of means that like there's a lot of effort that goes into this problem setup and the practice, and it's really cool to see kind of actually get to go through that experience.
Right. The whole point of writing these problems is to have teams solve them and to have teams enjoy them. So it's always a lot nicer when they actually get solved.
There's some subtext on this because we just did an Open Cup contest last night where like half of the problems went unsolved. But yeah, that was Yuhaju's run, so he's super strong contestant about or perhaps on a level above what most don't understand.
Yeah.
A lot of submissions coming in. Obviously, we don't get to know the exact results. I see Purdue, I see Harvard.
Yeah, I mean, all of these teams already have a score of 11, right? So
Washington, St. Louis, submitting G, which is one of the problems.
we should check to make sure whether these are optimistic or pessimistic scores.
I think they're pessimistic.
They're pessimistic. Okay,
So
so that means that
pessimistic.
they don't include any of the post freeze points.
Getting a little snapshot here, it looks like just Ben.
Right.
I don't know where the other teammates have gone, but I mean they're at 11, I believe. So
Right.
be relaxing.
Yeah, they actually finished. They actually finished a bit earlier than some of the other teams I saw at 11. But you
I
know,
guess right, because we saw that they went out of order on purpose.
Right.
You know, you can still finish at the same time, but that does hurt your penalty.
Right,
So,
right. It's pretty important to if you put the problem, if you solve the harder problems first, then kind of the time it took to solve that problem gets added to all the easy problems solved times.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you solve an easy problem first, it's less time is added. So it's pretty valuable to read all the problems quickly. Do you guys do you have any strategies for kind of going through all the problems and identifying the first ones to solve?
Yeah, I like to just kind of like speed read. Often there's problems that have shortcuts that are pretty quick also. But it's hard to say. Sometimes the judges will intentionally kind of sneak one by where it's like the problem is actually half the battle. And once you get that, it turns out that the rest of the problem isn't so bad. So it's kind of tough to say. Obviously, once the scoreboard does come in, you get to see what other teams have solved, and that informs that informs you a lot.
Yeah. Then you don't
But,
get the chance to get the.
Yeah.
But you kind of you make up for that by having the chance to win the contest.
Well, there's kind of this whole like skill level thing where basically some of these problems, like the ones I was mentioning, where it's kind of hard to process, or maybe it just looks hard, but it isn't that hard after all. Like often what can happen is that those problems go unsolved for a lot longer than they should, and part of what fuels that is that people are looking at the scoreboard and they're seeing that no one else got it, right? So it's like there's some problems where it feels like you should be able to do it, and you're not concerned about whether whether anyone else has solved it. But there's somewhere it's like, hey, no one else has this problem. Maybe it doesn't make sense to work on it. Yeah. Example of trying to solve the problems that have been solved by as many teams as possible. I think honestly, I have a little bit of fear around like trying a problem that no one else has solved yet. It could be impossible. All these.
Yeah, sometimes if you're working on problems sometimes there are some problems that other teams solve, but only have some prior knowledge or they've seen something about this before.
That's true.
So this sometimes shows up, especially in like contests, like online contests, where some of the competitors have done like all the problems they can get their hands on.
You have contestants from all over the world, right? It's like totally different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had a contest and Open Cup where Kevin just knew what to do when he solved this problem in like 10 minutes.
Right.
And I think no one else solved that in the contest, or maybe like one other group.
Yeah.
Something ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely happens.
I mean, usually the judges are pretty good about making sure that the problems haven't appeared before. But even if they haven't appeared before, sometimes there are variations, and some people just know what's going on.
Yeah. So I see gold and silver at like 1 and 2 are marked with gold and silver, and then 3 through 6 are bronze. Do you know if there are going to be medals at this event?
I believe there are going to be medals. I think there are 6 medals awarded.
Okay. So gold, silver, and bronze.
I believe that's right. And it will be the top 7 teams that have not yet qualified for the World Finals that will get additional berths.
Right. Kind of a mirror of like the World Finals where there are gold, silver, and bronze medals as well. So there it's usually 12. It's 4 gold, 4 silver, 4 bronze. Sometimes it goes to 13. Sometimes it doesn't. There were a couple of years where the same team got 13th twice in a row. Multiple times in a row. Yeah, I mean it's cool to kind of have that, to keep it as close to the real deal as possible.
Yeah, I guess there are 2 silver medals. Right.
Oh, 2 silver. So 1 gold, 2 silver, 3 bronze. Okay.
Right.
It's actually the same distribution as like 1 to 2 to 3.
Right.
I guess that I half of the contestants it's not quite the same here.
Yeah, it is a little surprising when you tell people that but you only got 3rd place or something. But I think they're the place. Everyone really thinks about the placing.
Yeah, and it's hard too. I mean,
it is still hard.
Getting top 6.
Yeah.
Like at an event like this, I mean, you have teams all across North America. Like MIT here, they solved all the problems.
Right.
they're sitting at 7.
Right.
It's just the prelims,
Right.
the dry run. But
Yeah.
yeah, you can really see these numbers creeping up as well. Like Lethbridge is in 55th, but they actually have 6 problems.
Right.
I expect that curve will ramp up even more. I think I saw someone who had like 9 problems that was in the fifth. So
Right,
almost all the teams are finishing the whole set. And to be 100% honest, I think most of the others go the whole set if they wanted to.
Right, right.
It's just that kind of they're trying different things. So
Right.
yeah, a lot of really really strong teams here.
Yeah, a lot of teams, don't much about their score. Yeah. So as we get towards lunch, I wanted to ask you what's your strategy for eating lunch during the contest?
Ooh. Wait, so do they have all the lunches at the beginning, or do they pick them up?
So I'm not so sure about today. I think lunch is going to be served after the contest today, but a full
It's
5
5
hours, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of nicely covers the entire period that you might want to eat lunch.
Yeah. It's like 10 to 3, is that right? Or is
I think that's around right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. And I mean, yeah, same thing with a lot of other ICPC style contests or with IOI. We often do 5-hour contests.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so I've always thought that like, it's good to get a break and to kind of take your mind off and then reset. Often it even helps you. We have a nice look at the scoreboard here, by the way. But I feel like in practice, I just get like so worked up in the moment and thinking about the problem and I just forget to eat or something. I don't know if I've actually eaten all that much at any of these on-site events when they've had lunch.
I think I've eaten lunch only once in the middle of a contest, which is probably not great for my health.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you're kind of just in the contest, and there's all this like energy and adrenaline, and that's kind of just pushing you through.
Yeah. Speaking of, I mean, I feel like there's this whole this whole part of doing the contest, which is like the preparation beforehand. So like we're talking about lunch, but also like eating breakfast before the contest, or like getting a good sleep, and so on. And I know, I mean, like I have a lot of rituals, for example, that I do before contests, and I think a lot of other contestants do. Like, I mean, like, this contest adds some something, but to be able to do that well, you also have to be in kind of like tip-top mental shape as well. So.
Right. Mental and physical shape.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty important to get sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're looking at Princeton here. It seems like Duke. Yeah. We're kind of teams.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, they've also solved all the problems, so
Yeah.
we're kind of just messing around. This is Java.
So, I guess we can spend some time talking about this. I think Duke is using Sea Lion,
okay.
which is one of the IDs provided by JetBrains, one of our spots. And yeah, there's definitely some variety in like what kind of environments teams develop in. Some teams prefer to use these IDEs. There's some advantages you get, like sometimes the syntax checking is nicer.
Or, warnings.
Warnings and stuff. But other teams just prefer to use Vim. Or like get it or something.
I'm on the pretty extreme end of that. I usually just compete in straight get it, like text editor, and then you compile those at one command line. That's all I would work with.
Yeah.
Which is I think like pros and cons. Obviously, I mean like I think there's a lot that you do get from using IDEs in contests. So.
Right. Yeah. And so IDEs, they obviously give you more feedback. They sometimes even handle compilation and stuff for you. But on the other hand, they're not always available. So that's why some teams prefer to use like Vim. For instance, I know I don't think it's true anymore, but at some years in the past, at our Boston pre-regional, the only way we could access the contest was through SSH, and so you had to use Nano or Vim in SSH in order to edit the code.
Yeah, I don't use Vim or anything. I think for that contest, my teammates coded a lot more than I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's another part of it too, which is kind of like a longer term effect, which is if you just stick to a text editor, it's kind of like the whole like dumb canoe thing. But like basically, if you just use a text editor, then it almost pushes you to get to the point where like you have a really solid understanding of these things, like where you kind of can just naturally type and like catch any bugs as you're writing them, and so on. I think the Donald Knuth story is basically like back in the days. you had to do a lot to like compile code. Like compiling was something that you did, and so naturally, you know, making bugs was a lot more costly then. And he was saying that it actually taught him a lot because it really taught him to tire and all of that down to focus on it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think when you're practicing, it's often good to kind of put additional constraints on yourself and kind of make things harder for yourself.
Yeah.
And that'll, you know, kind of help you get better at, you know, solving these.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it goes all the way around for practice too. Like, you know, even just kind of doing the kinds of problems, right? It's like if you know that geometry is something that's not your strength. Your way to find geometry problems and so on. Like a lot of different things to just like. Essentially, by the time you sit down in the contest hall, you've done everything that you can to be at the level that you want to be.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be a geometry problem tomorrow?
You know, I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of geometry myself. I think there are cool ideas in geometry, but there's a lot of mechanics that go into it. There's also kind of this state that you get in where you just have wrong answer.
Yeah.
And you know that there's some off by one or some precision or something.
Yeah, the thing about geometry is it's often just precision or being careful about like intersection or you know, some edge cases about points coinciding. And those are kind of the hardest cases to replicate and also, you know, the hardest cases to actually fix.
It's a skill though, for sure.
I
think part of the reasons that I'm not the biggest fan of geometry is because I'm not great at it. I know that there are people who are really good at writing things. It's a little bit an area where it's good to have like a really extensive book. So in this contest and ICPC contests, the contestants are allowed to bring in a paper copy of the book, which I think is 25 pages.
Right. Yeah. It's 25 pages, and it has to be readable at, I believe, half a meter of distance. So you can't just cram tiny text on it.
I'm just imagining teams walking up to the registration desk and they have this like microfile. Can you bring like a microscope into that? But yeah, so so like that helps a lot, especially you know, a lot of the boilerplate geometry code. So not only do you have that code to type up, but you know that it's correct and you know that it's covers all the edge cases. I've seen things where, for example, they also do something to like hash the program. Maybe not including spaces, maybe including spaces. But like so that way when you write your template, then you check hash, print it out on your paper, and so then you're 100% sure that you wrote it exactly right. You didn't mess any characters there.
Right. Yeah. So we're looking at the score now. One thing I was informed by the staff was that G had a 100% solve rate. So it's not that all 100% of teams solved it, but there were actually 0 in D. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we see 1 now. I don't know if that's people just messing around. I remember.
I mean that's 1 pen after freeze.
Oh, that's a pending submission. I see. The reds are the wrong.
The reds are the wrong submission.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Or I think the reds are the teams that haven't yet solved the problem.
Who have submitted but not completed.
Yeah.
So does that mean that pretty much for all the other problems except maybe the pending submissions?
Right.
If anyone submitted.
Right. Pretty. It's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. And so like we said, 60 teams scored it, so it was like 57 of them had D. But even the hardest problem here, F, more than half the teams have solved it. So.
Right.
Yeah. It's gonna be an exciting look for tomorrow. I mean, I think like there's definitely an aspect of like the intimidation factor. Like people are going to be looking for score tomorrow because they solved this entire set in 30 minutes.
Right.
So yeah, there's something to that there.
Yeah. They definitely have kind of this. They definitely kind of have this psychological leg up.
Yeah.
Their team. On the other hand, you know, maybe some teams intentionally took it slow so that, you know, they don't get kind of sucked into this trap.
Yeah. It's crazy, actually. I think the penalty difference between first and second, between Swarthmore and the next team, is like about as big as between second and like seventh or something like that. So yeah, they were way ahead of the pack. 85, 386, 394, 396, right? Like a lot of teams finished right around the same time. And Swarthmore was just way ahead.
Yeah.
Maybe they did all the regionals as properties, or maybe
that's pretty possible. I don't know if particular did, but I bet a lot of these teams have actually looked at all these.
Yeah.
They're kind of looking at other regionals as a pretty good source of practice problems.
Yeah, one of the best sources you can have because it's like these are real contests.
Right. You know, they're approximately the right difficulty for regionals, and so you get a lot of good feedback.
When you guys were practicing, did you do all the regionals?
Number of regionals. I think we did also a lot of like European regionals.
Yeah.
Some of those are a little harder in some styles of problems as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's good to just kind of see a lot of those.
NERC is I'm a big fan of NERC. I think
Right,
they
right.
consistently have really cool problems. So,
Yeah. So we did a lot of those, and we also did a lot of kind of other contests that people had written for training camps and things like that. Yeah. And so I think if you there are a lot of like versions of problems. If you like find the right people to ask and stuff like that. Kind of doing a lot of problems, I think, is really the best way to improve at this game.
And I think the best things about competitive programming, honestly, is just that there's so many problems available everywhere, right? So all of these old contests, there's judges like
Right.
code forces, top code, or at code, or
Right.
at code, or everything basically.
Right.
And so even online judges like Spodge or things like that.
Yeah.
Which I heard is called Sploy. I mean, I think it's like a super excited in. I mean, I feel like it wasn't always this way too. Like, I mean, there's definitely kind of like a time and place,
So,
say 10, 20 years ago.
I see this infographic of 0. Do you guys know what that means?
That's correct, yeah. This is ASCII duck times 0.
Do any of you guys have any ideas what that means?
You guys tomorrow.
I think that means there were no ducks in the contest before.
I think in IOI 2013, there was an animal contest for
No, I mean I wasn't there.
Oh, really?
Wow.
There's also the whole like the rubber duck thing, like rubber duck programming, which is basically when you're trying to debug or think through a problem, you imagine that you're experimenting with a rubber duck.
Right. And so I guess they're going to do awards soon. I'm not sure if this is before or after lunch.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, and we could see like a lot of these teams. One of these teams, I can't tell which, but based on the stream, it's like they have like 6 problems that they've submitted.
In the last half hour.
In the last half hour, yeah.
Yeah.
Wonder if they were holding them or, they just started taking it seriously.
Right. Or they just wanted to.
Or maybe they were just submitting.
Yeah. There's really no way to know they're.
Just submit while loops on all the.
Yeah.
The intimidation factor.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, because the teams can see on the scoreboard like they don't know whether they got it, but they submit. So
Right.
I could see that being a thing. I mean.
Right. Yeah, I remember last year at World Finals, after the top team, they kept typing. They kept typing just random stuff, even though they knew they weren't going to solve any of the remaining problemums.
Yeah.
It looks like they were still working and.
Right. We see a comparison of MIT versus Stanford. So MIT with all of the problems, Stanford with submit 7 more. And E and K, I believe, aren't the hardest to go. I believe 8 minutes left. They could totally submit those as well.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I'm gonna hop off, and Nick, I think, is just gonna take my place.
So I think that at this point this is going to be all the 4 choose 2.
Have we actually done the all 4 choose 2?
I think so, right? So it started off me and Matt, and then it was you guys, Andrew and Nick. And then, I think we did. So this is going to be the last one.
So we actually finally did all the possible pairings, and maybe not all of the possible subsets, because that'll take a little bit more effort. Looks like we're coming in on just under 10 minutes left.
That's right. Yeah, it looks like 7-8 minutes to go. Again, a lot of teams already finished this entire set. The set in particular is the easiest or second easiest problem from each of the different regions. So we have 11 different problems for 11 different regions. And I mean, it's primarily kind of a warm-up to get everyone comfortable, but it's also a chance, I think, to show off a little bit. So.
Yeah, definitely sort of at, I think, previous dress rehearsals in the past, there are some teams that definitely kind of try to be like sophomore. They're like, we're going to go in, we're going to solve the set as fast as possible, we're going to intimidate everyone, we're going to show them, like, we're really fast, we're here to win, and so on. Mm-hmm. And then there are the teams that definitely want to try to come in, like, under the radar, and they don't want to. They want to test out things properly during the rehearsal, so they come in fully prepared for the contest, and they don't have like a giant target painted on their back because they came in and just blew
Yeah.
everyone away at dress rehearsal.
Yeah, speaking of self, yeah, that's what you're all about, actually.
Oh dear, that was my team. That's what my team did at the dress rehearsal in 2012 and 20.
Did you get the first solve it well found?
In 2012, I got the first to solve in the rehearsal and also in the finals. And then in fact, actually, people recognized me. They were like, "You're first to solve again," and I was like, "There's no way. Like, good night here. He's gonna get it." And then I don't think he got it actually. I don't remember who got it in 2013.
I thought the story was gonna be like everyone recognized you and then you did it again.
No, I didn't do it. I had aged a year and not as fast as I do.
But yeah, I mean, it's cool too because like there are a lot of different, I'll say, styles on this, right, for contestants. And the thing is that with a team of 3, it's really helpful to have somebody different, like to have someone who solves early problems quickly, like me or you, and then to have someone who gets really deep into the math, for example, or someone who knows a lot of data structures, or somebody who's really comfortable with geometry. So all these different archetypes of problems, and there is that component there.
Yeah, definitely. Like with your team of 3 people, like you have people who are like specialists in one area or another. Like on my teams, the implementation person. Like I would code quickly, and I would like type out like any sort of long sort of simulation problem or any parsing problem. But if I had like a data structures problem, like both of my teams that year had like people who are specialists, and so they would be the ones to take the problem and sort of figure it out. And I think a lot of the teams here have also sort of crafted one thing that is, I think, very common in North American regionals, at least, is as you and you know, most people.
They're more common in.
I think that there are some regionals that definitely try to do it. Like I'm a setter for Pacific Northwest, and every year there's always like, can we please have a geometry problem? And at every NAIPC. I believe there's been a geometry.
Really?
You know, if I was betting on it, I'd on there being geometry. And I think, like, if these teams have done their homework, they would have done like previous like these, and they'd look and they'd see like what sorts of problems have these people set in the past? Because all of those setters, a lot of them, I think, probably would have transitioned over to the NAC, and they'll bring that sort of same style. We'll probably like. I would not be surprised to see a set that reminded me a lot of NAIPC.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, like, so we do have some of these precursors to draw from, like NAIPC, but this is the first NAC, and so totally, you know, they'll try something different.
Yeah.
It'll be,
Yeah, I will be. I'll be shocked if there's no geometry. I feel like that's something that I'm sort of looking forward to. I want to see what they've done, but you know, if we're not going to geometry, then
give me a probability. What's the probability that we see a geometry problem tomorrow?
I'll give you. I would say I'm 95% confident.
95.
Yes, 95.
You're interested in a wager on that?
Oh, okay. I'm on stream, so
we'll
I don't
talk about
think
the soft line.
I'm on stream. I can't back it now.
Yeah. So last 3 minutes of the contest, I think. You know, in an official contest, often at this point, what you see is this scramble to submit. People trying to heuristics, people mass submission in to try to pass some problems. Here, obviously, like a ton of the teams have finished already, so a little bit less of that, but still some submissions. I see McGill, University of Washington, CWRU as well.
Yeah, I imagine some teams are still sort of. Now that you see, like, there are coaches on the floor, like their coaches are probably asking them, like, you know, there are 2 minutes left, have you figured out everything? A lot of the teams you can kind of see, like, are sort of milling around and not really focusing. Like, I think in this shot, like, we can, so there's a ribbon across the camera. But, like, you can see sort of, like, Yale is sort of looking, like, at their computer, sort of, like, not super intense about it, and some of the teams are just straight up just like standing and chatting and not at their machine.
And each team has their own showing color, right? So if you see a desk where there's lots of people of different colors, it means that it's just people from different teams kind of just hanging out, just mingling.
Yeah, definitely want to not be like stress out too much about dress rehearsal. Just sort of talking with other teams. They're probably looking at how they felt about everything.
For sure. So 90 spot here. And as soon as this finishes up, I think we'll probably have lunch, or are we going to have the reveal? I don't know how, because I mean, if we get into the reveal, it's going to be quite a bit of time. I wonder if they'll just like keep it simple and just do the whole reveal at once. But
they actually mentioned to some of us how the reveal would work the day of, and they're going to do the reveal in the hall that you can see right here. And so what they're going to do is they actually have to set up like chairs, and right now, like, you can't set a bunch of chairs in the contest room because it would interfere with all of the all of the teams and where they're currently sitting. But after the chairs, and I think they're gonna have to keep all of the booths. Oh, it looks like according to now they're in their last minute. And now there's only
40 seconds left. Stanford just came in with a submission to E, and I don't know if they submitted K as well, but if they did, that would be all of the problems at this point. So yeah, pretty interesting as we wrap up in the last 20 seconds here.
Yeah, so I have a feeling that they will. If I had to guess, I think they're not going to broadcast the big reveal. I don't think they have to move all the chairs and get everyone seated and run it. So maybe they'll just do it really quickly or something. But on the actual day, it's going to be a big thing. Now the contest is officially ended.
That's caught. Here's some applause. And I think that's that. So we're going to probably wrap up in the next couple of minutes here and head over to another review and see how that goes.
Indeed. It looks like someone up there is giving an announcement.
So I want to introduce Jeff Donahue once again.
A little faint for us. I don't think we can quite make out. They're just swapping.
People taking pictures with their balloons here. 3 balloons, 3 contestants. What's that?
Will be at 1 p.m. in B401, 402.
It sounds like they're giving directions. So they're going to give directions for the contestants to eat lunch, and then they're also going to do a post-mortem. They're going to address some questions that came up during. Every year they always something invariably comes up, and there'll be a team that asks a really good question that they haven't seen before, and the technical staff will have to figure it out all in time for tomorrow.
Yeah, it was interesting because we talked to Arnav earlier, right? He was saying that right now, when you fail, it tells you what case you failed on. And that's typically not, I'll say, kosher in how we think about ICPC contests, but it's time to take that off before tomorrow.
Yeah, that sort of thing where they tell you what case you fail on, it depends on the contest. Like, ICPC has never been a contest that tells you, like, oh, you failed test case 124. But on Code Forces, they'll gladly tell you, hey, you failed test case 124, and then you're like, wow, there were 124 tests. Like, that's a lot of tests.
And you passed 123 of them.
Yeah. But so definitely, like, there are these sorts of details that can make a big difference. Like, if you knew, like, that you passed like 123 test cases, maybe that affects, like, the way that you think about, like, oh, maybe I just need to, like, add a heuristic and I'll, like, fix it. Like, my solution's almost right, like 99% of the time, and there's like this 1% that I can maybe, like, hack my way around. Versus if you get, like, test case 2 wrong and you're like, well, I guess my solution's completely wrong. Maybe.
Yeah, test case 2 wrong, or test case 2 RT, or even like test case 1 wrong, definitely.
Yes, the classic one thing that I've done many a time is compiler is a big one, and another one is like, oh, I have this test case, I failed this test case, and now my code passes, and then I submit it, and then I run my code on the samples, and it fails the samples.
Or it's like you leave some of your like debugging output in or things like that. You still get the wrong submit even if you fail test 1, right?
Yeah.
So it does hurt you. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that
again, make sure you leave everything in place, including the balloons. Everything in place, including the balloons. Everybody, let's head to lunch and have a good time. Everybody, let's head to lunch and have a good time. Don't forget the A to Q at 1 o'clock. Don't forget the A to Q at 1 o'clock. Career fair at 3:15. Career fair at 3:15. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody.
Usually